just setting us up to fail. And that is why I feel as though they are taking away in the other. Because at least for right now, we have those seats such as the women representative seats, which do not have a sunset clause. And why is it that it's only the women's seats that are traded around? Why couldn't they add the 47 to the Senate, but also leave the 47 at the National Assembly level? I also heard some senators here talking in a very condescending manner about the women in the National Assembly who have GAF, which is the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, and talking about their only being able to buy tents and chairs. My friends, for the women in the rural areas, those tents and chairs and the bursaries that they get from their women representatives mean a great deal. The 8 million shillings per constituency is a lot better than the 0 that they will have in this house. So the women are able to be empowered a little bit with that little than the 0 that is here. And maybe in the next cycle or two, they are able to run for the single constituency, the Senate, or even the governor's seats. So let us not take away what they have and bring them here where there is 0 and where we know how hard it is to maintain these seats without anything. They've talked a lot about the oversight fund that should come here. And I want to say these guys must be visitors in Jerusalem. We have been here talking in a very condescending manner for the oversight fund. And the same principals who are helping them bring this amendment have not had good faith talking about their only being able to buy tents and chairs. So let us not give the rabbit or whatever it is that's in the hand for two that are in the bush. So what I propose is that those in the National Assembly with the GAF stay there and then add more women to the Senate, because I also believe that they should be able to vote and not be used as flower girls, like we have seen in the last few instances. And we do not need a constitutional amendment to get the 2/3 gender principle in place. If only the 2 handshakers, who are the principals, who are the ones who determine how parliament votes, who have helped in capturing this parliament, if they had enough goodwill towards the women folk of this country, they would call their members of parliament, be it the National Assembly, they would call their senators, and the 2/3 gender bill would pass in the morning. By 10 a.m. we would have that passed. But because there is no goodwill, they want to dangle some carrots that we know are of no value to us. They add no value. And I also take this opportunity to congratulate Senator Kavindu from Machakos, because she has helped this house become 2/3 gender principle compliant. So I'm very, very happy for that, and more women should be empowered. And thank you very much, and I wish you very well as you continue serving those of Machakos. So as I conclude, as I can see my light is on, let me talk about this issue of the politics of us versus them that this BBI pretends, or this constitutional amendment bill pretends to want to cure. We live and we are in a democracy. Our politics is of a democracy. You win, you take the government, you lose, you go home and wait for the next time around. We do not need a constitutional amendment to appease the loser. You go work hard, build a coalition, and come back the next time. We saw in the US Congress, actually in the US Capitol, back on the 6th of June 2021, where there was an insurrection and a mob that rioted and wanted to go ahead by force and reverse the win of President Joe Biden, because these rioters were the supporters of former President Trump. But what we saw is what needs to happen here. There is no room and there is no day that the person who loses can then take power by force. What should happen is if you lose, you go back, take an account of what it is that went wrong, and then try to do better next time. And if you're lucky, then you take over. But you cannot tell us that we need to amend the Constitution to appease two people. It is their problems and not the problem of this country. So I completely disagree with that we need a constitutional amendment to avert bitterly contested elections. That, my friends, is the nature of democracy. And if you're not up to it, then stay away from the kitchen. Don't run for anything, go sell ice cream. That may be the best career. So for right now, as far as the 35% to the counties, we know that right now 15% under the Constitution is the floor and not the ceiling. So if the government had goodwill, it would give the counties even 40%. My point being, yes, in time, it would be good to put it in the Constitution. But right now, it is not a priority. The government can give more. The government is broke. The government has even been unable to give 15% to the counties as we stand. They are owed almost 100 billion. So when you talk to me about quickly putting 35% in the Constitution, first show goodwill by giving the 15%, and then next year maybe put 20% or 25%, and then I'll believe that you can do it. We had a ward development fund by Senator Kangata of Muranga. If we really have goodwill and we wanted to make sure that we entrench that devolution and come up with a ward development fund, the two handshaker principals can call their MPs, and the ward development fund would not be gathering dust in the National Assembly, but instead would be passed, and we would not need to be discussing that as a constitutional amendment because it would be in the law. I do support the county assemblies controlling their own funds and not being controlled by governors. As a former speaker, I know how crazy that gets, as governors then use that as a stick and carrot. So that we could do as a legislation by both the National Assembly and the Senate. So I do not believe there is anything urgent at this point in time requiring a constitutional amendment. So I stand here to oppose this constitutional amendment. There is some good things in it, but even if you bake a nice cake with a little bit of poison, it's still gonna kill me, so I'm not gonna take it. I oppose. Thank you.
Asante sana kwa mchango wako, Senator Susan Kihika kutoka Nakuru. Senator Mary Senator kwenye mtandao.
The bill is important, but it is not a priority to Kenyans.
Samahani Senator, una dakika 13, na pia nataka kutoa uamuzi kutoka kipengele cha 106 kwamba kwa sababu tuna maseneta watatu ambao wamesalia, basi tutamaliza huu mjadala leo. Kwa hiyo mwenyekiti wa kamati uwe chonjo. Unaweza kuendelea.
Thank you. I am saying that I want to go on record by saying that the bill is important, but it is not a priority to Kenyans. Right now, we are at the middle of a pandemic. We are also in an economic crisis. Kenyans are being faced by a lot of challenges that have been brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. Kenyans are struggling with unemployment rates. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, to me, this is not a priority that the Senate and the National Assembly should be hurrying up to this debate upon. Mr. Speaker, but I also want to point out a few issues. Mr. Speaker, in this bill, where is a clause that is ensuring that women are going to sit at the top level of leadership in this country? If we are extending or expanding the executive in the bill, if the promoters are for equity purposes, where is the clause to ensure that women are going to sit in the executive? Mr. Speaker, where is the clause that will ensure that the minority tribes like the Ilmolo, the the Iljamus and others who do not have numbers will be sitting in the executive. If the promoters were genuine, that they wanted equity and they wanted to address issues of equality, why don't we have a clause or an amendment within the bill that ensures that the minority are also factored in the executive? We could be seeing maybe a deputy prime minister or a deputy president for that matter being given to the minority tribe. But in this bill, having gone through it, I've only seen leadership coming from majority and populous areas. Mr. Speaker, I also have an issue with the increase of members of parliament. An increase in the number of members of parliament is an increase in the persons who are going to be attached to the members of parliament, an increase to the number of officers, an increase to the number of CDF staff, an increase to the human resource that is going to be attached to the members of parliament, and therefore an increase burden to the already overtaxed Kenyans. Kenyans are already overtaxed. Today, Mr. Speaker, not many Kenyans can even afford fuel. We are already overtaxed. And therefore, an increase to the members of parliament and to the Senate is an increase to the burden which is going to face Kenyans even in future. Mr. Speaker, in the amendments to increase the number of the membership of Senate, there is no clause to ensure that there are minority tribes nominations and minority and also representatives of persons with disability. Mr. Speaker, I also have an issue of an increased allocation going to counties. This one, this is an issue that will encourage so many Kenyans to really think that there will be a lot of money going to counties. But at the moment, we are already seeing counties without salaries for the last 3 months. So why don't we ask ourselves, if at the moment we are not even able to give counties 15%, where are we getting this 35% with this kind of an economy where Kenyans are barely even affording bread? Mr. Speaker, I also have an issue with women representatives being moved to the Senate without a fund. The Affirmative Action Fund, which was created for the 47 women representatives, was good for the women visibility and therefore helping these women to be able to be even elected for other elective seats. But when you send them to the Senate without a fund, these women will not be able to do any projects, be it social development or physical development that is highly needed by our constituents. And therefore, this will mean demeaning these seats for women and making women look like they will not be able to do any kind of project. Mr. Speaker, an increase of women in the Senate is welcome. For me, it's a good idea, but we should capacitate these women by giving the Senate an oversight fund and making sure that it is also in the constitution, just like the ward development fund, just like the constituency development fund, just like the county allocation, which is 35%, it should also be in the constitution so that we don't look like women must always fight to get some little allocation. It should also be in the constitution. Mr. Speaker, I think this bill is just an issue of, it's just an amendment of creating seats and also of giving power to those ones who are going to lose in an election. I think what we should be doing as Kenyans and as Parliament is strengthening our independent institutions like IEBC. We should be looking at equipping IEBC, giving more allocation to IEBC, and preparing it for a transparent election that will make sure that those ones who have the votes will be in office and not an issue of giving power to people through a bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Asante sana kwa maelezo yako ya ufasaha na hotuba yako nzuri. Sasa hivi nampa Seneta Derito John Kinyua kutoka Laikipia.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Kwanza kabisa nataka kupongeza kamati ya haki, masuala ya kisheria na haki za kibinadamu, Senator Okongo Omugeni akiwa mwenyekiti kwa kazi nzuri waliofanya ya kuweza kuchanganua haya mabadiliko ya kikatiba. Kwanza kabisa nataka kusema haya masuala ya kikatiba ni mambo muhimu sana, tunapaswa tuyaangalie kwa mapana na marefu. Lakini Bwana Spika, kabla sijaweza kujitosa katika hayo mabadiliko ya kisheria, ni vizuri julikane wazi jambo ambalo ni la dharura wakati huu, ni masuala ambayo yameweza kuwakumba wa Kenya. Kuna ugonjwa ambao umekuja ambao umekuwa ukiwasumbua wa Kenya, ugonjwa wa corona. Watu wengi wamekuwa wakisumbuliwa na ule ugonjwa, na ukiangalia katika sehemu nyingi za dunia, hasa India, unaona vile watu ambavyo wanaendelea kusononeka kutokana na ule ugonjwa. Mimi naona ya kwamba sisi jambo ambalo tungekuwa tukizingatia sana ni kuangalia kwamba Wakenya wetu wanaweza kujikinga kutoka na ugonjwa ule, na hasa kuwapatia zile tiba ambazo zinapatikana ndio waweze kujikinga na ugonjwa ule. Ukiangalia sana Bwana Spika, ni ya kwamba ugonjwa huu umeleta sintofahamu katika nchi yetu. Watu wanaendelea kufa, jambo ambalo idara ambayo inahusika ya afya, ukizingatia hasa NHIF ambayo inashughulika kuwalipia wagonjwa ambao wamepata ugonjwa, hawalipiwi watu wakipata huu ugonjwa. Kwa hivyo jambo la muhimu ambalo lingekuwa ni dharura ambalo tungekuwa tukiliongea katika jumba hili si kuangalia marekebisho ya katiba, tungekuwa tukiangalia vile ambavyo tutasaidia watu wetu ambao wamekosa kazi, wamekosa ajira kutokana na ule ugonjwa. Lakini kwa sababu haya marekebisho yako katika bunge, niangalie moja kwa moja. Jambo la kwanza ambalo linasemekana ni ya kwamba tutakuwa na mawiano. Kwa Kiswahili, kwa Kiingereza wanasema inclusivity, kwa sababu kutakuwa na viti, kutakuwa na waziri mkuu, naibu waziri mkuu, pamoja na wale wengine ambao wameongezwa. Na nikasikia wenzangu wakisema ya kwamba ukileta hao viongozi, ulete viongozi waongeze, Kenya watu watapigana tena. Lakini hilo si jambo la kweli, kwa sababu hayo ni watu ambao wanajitakia makuu wenyewe. Na yale ambayo angekuwa yakiangaliwa ni ya kwamba mtu kama ameenda katika uchaguzi, akubali akishindwa, akubali matokeo. Mswahili anasema ya kwamba ukishindwa unakubali umeshindwa, na asiyekubali kushindwa si mshindani. Kwa hivyo kusema ya kwamba ati kutakuwa na mawiano kwa sababu tayari utatengeneza nyadhifa nyingi, huo si ukweli. Kwa sababu nchi nyingine unapata kuko na hawa viongozi wengi, lakini watu wanaendelea kupigana. Bwana Spika, ukienda katika kaunti zetu, watu wanashindana wengi na watu hawapigani katika kaunti. Ukienda hata katika maeneo mengi ya bunge unapata watu hawapigani. Kwa hivyo kuongeza hivi viti, hasa hivi viti vya waziri mkuu na manaibu wa waziri wakuu, jambo ambalo tunafanya ni kuongeza ushuru kwa Wakenya. Watu ambao tayari wamegharimikiwa vikubwa na ugonjwa tayari umewaadhiri. Alafu tena tunaingia pale, sisi tunawaambia tunaongeza viti, hasa viti vya waziri mkuu na manaibu waziri wakuu na wale ambao ofisi zao, unapata Wakenya wataendelea kugharamika na ilhali ugonjwa umewaadhiri na wanaendelea kupata shida. Kazi wamepoteza. Unaona kama sasa watu wanafunga biashara zao, wale ambao wamekuwa wakifanya biashara mpaka usiku kucha, unapata wafanye biashara zao kwa sababu ya vile ambavyo ugonjwa umetuadhiri. Kwa hivyo sioni haja yoyote ya kuongeza vile viti. Jambo lingine, Bwana Spika, tumekuwa tukiambiwa ya kwamba ati pesa zitaongezeka kwenda kaunti zetu kutoka 15% mpaka 35%. Bwana Spika, sisi tulikuwa hapa tukijadili mswada wa one man, one vote, one shilling. Nakumbuka vizuri tulikuwa na Senator Charargei kutoka Nandi, Senator Susan Keheka, Senator Anwar, Senator Wetangula. Tulijadili kwa marefu na mapana. Ikakuwa ni kizungumkuti, ilikuwa ni nguo kuchanika. Bwana Spika, sisi tulikaa hapa, tukazungumza na ilhali ilimchukua rais mwenyewe kuongeza zaidi ya bilioni 50 ndio jambo lile liweze kutendeka. Kwa nini alifanya vile na haikuwa imeandikwa katika? Kwa sababu hakuna jambo lolote alifanya, hakuvunja sheria yoyote, kwa sababu katiba inasema pesa zile ambazo zinapaswa kwenda county, zile chache zaidi ni 15%. Kwa hivyo unaweza ukaongeza kutoka 15% kwenda mbele ikiwa ungetaka. Kwa hivyo mimi sioni kwa nini hili jambo lisemwe ya kwamba ni mpaka iandikwe katika daftari zetu, katika katiba yetu. Ikiwa mtu anataka, hiyo inaweza ikafanyika. Jambo lingine ni ya kwamba Kenya kumekuwa na shida kwa sababu baada ugonjwa huu kuja, unapata ya kwamba hata kupata zile hela inakuwa ni kizungumkuti. Kwa hivyo tungengoja kidogo. Sisi hakuna mtu anasema ya kwamba 30% kwenda mashinani ni vibaya. Ni vizuri hata sana, lakini ni mpaka uangalie ni wakati gani ambao unasema hayo maneno. Kuna mambo ya Ombudsman ni kizungumkuti, ndugu zangu wameongea sana kuhusu haya mambo, na ni vizuri ya kwamba wanasheria wetu tuwapatie huru wa kufanya kazi zao bila kuweza kuwachokora zaidi. Kwa kuongeza maeneo bunge, mimi naunga 100%, kwa sababu ukiangalia maeneo ya bunge, sehemu ambazo ukiangalia kama Laikipia, ukiangalia mahali kama Ruiru, ukiangalia sehemu kama mahali kunaitwa Kieni, uangalie sehemu inaitwa Kipipiri, sehemu zile zina watu wengi zaidi, na vile ambavyo inapaswa kujulikana ni ya kwamba huduma inapewa watu, sio sehemu kubwa wa sehemu. Hapo ndipo tulisimama wima kidete, na hii ina support maeneo yetu yale tulisema ya kwamba one man, one vote, one shilling. Kwa sababu ukiangalia kama ni afya inapewa mwananchi, kama ni barabara mwananchi atapita katika ile barabara. Kwa hivyo hizi sehemu zimeongezwa sehemu 70. Mimi naunga mkono kwa sababu watu wale wako katika sehemu zile. Nikikupa mfano wa Laikipia kuna watu constituency moja, Laikipia Magharibi ina watu zaidi ya 1135 na wanakilishwa na mbunge mmoja. Ukitembea sehemu nyingine katika nchi ya Kenya, unapata sehemu kama ile na mbunge anawakilisha watu wachache. Tuseme mfano 40,000 ndio anawakilisha. Kwa hivyo ni paka sisi tutoshane wote, kwa sababu Kiswahili inasema mgala muue na haki umpe. Hapo ni mpaka hata sisi tupewe haki, kwa sababu tuko katika nchi hii yetu ya Kenya na tunapaswa kuwa tukiwakilishwa, kwa sababu tunalipa ushuru kama wenzetu walioko katika nchi hii yetu ya Kenya. Tumekuwa tukiambiwa ya kwamba vijana wale wamemaliza chuo kikuu, wakimaliza chuo kikuu hawatalipa help ya ile loan ambayo amekuwa amechukua. Mimi nasema jambo ambalo tungekuwa tukifanya kama serikali ni kushughulikia sana ndugu zetu waweze kupata kazi, badala ya kumwambia mtu hatalipa, kwa sababu hata baada ya miaka 4 na hajapata kazi bado atakuwa na ile shida ya kutolipa ile loan. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri tuwe tukiongea maneno ya watu kupata ajira ndio waweze kulipa ule ushuru. Bwana Spika, mimi ninasumbuka pangu rohoni nikiwa kama seneta wa Laikipia. Ninasimama hapa kuongea kuhusu marekebisho ya katiba, ilhali watu wa Laikipia wanaendelea kuvamiwa kwa ukosefu wa usalama. Bwana Spika, watu wanaendelea kuuawa. Bwana Spika, kama jana Bwana Spika, watu pale Laikipia, ukiangalia upande wa Rufere, watu wameshambuliwa mithili ya nyuki. Bwana Spika, kwa hivyo mimi ninasikia vigumu wakati nimesimama hapa kujadili mambo ya katiba, ilhali wale ambao wamenituma hapa wameniambia Kenya uongee mambo ya usalama wetu, Kenya uongee mambo ya vile ambavyo tutapata ajira. Wakati huu ni msimu wa kupanda, Bwana Spika, hakuna fertilizer, watu wanaendelea kupata shida. Kwa hivyo kile ambacho tungekuwa tukifanya kama watu ambao wamejitolea kusaidia nchi yao ni tuongee masuala ambayo yanahusu wa Kenya. Lakini tukija hapa, Bwana Spika, kuongea masuala ambayo yangejadiliwa baadaye baada ya ugonjwa huu kutushambulia. Ukiangalia Bwana Spika, wakati tunaongea na wewe tunasema ndio tutaongeza pesa katika county. Mimi nasema inshallah vizuri kabisa. Lakini ukiangalia pesa zile ambazo zinaenda county, tumekuwa hivi juzi tukiangalia vile ambavyo vimetumika katika corona. Unapata county nyingi Bwana Spika hazitumii hela vile ambavyo vinapaswa kutumia. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri tukiangalia katika BBI hii. BBI ingesema vizuri senators wapewe tita la hela za kufanya kitu inaitwa oversight. Kwa sababu huwezi ukafanya oversight ukienda uangalie mbunge ana pesa zake za CDF, lakini senator hana chochote, yeye anatembea tu akiangalia, ilhali governor mwenyewe sisi tumepita hapa tumepeana pesa, lakini ukienda pale katika kaunti zetu unapata senator anatembea bila chochote. Jambo lingine ambalo tungependa kusema Bwana Spika, mimi naunga mkono 100%. Pesa ambazo zinaenda kwa MCA mwenyewe, Ward Development Fund, pesa ambazo zitakuwa zikienda kwa mjumbe wa county, kwa sababu yule mjumbe wa county ndio anaifahamu sehemu aliyotoka, atajua ni masuala gani atakayoyaangazia, mambo ya maji, mambo ya barabara, mambo ya kujua ni nini itakayotumika pale katika sehemu yake. Lakini hiyo ingewezekana kwa sababu Kang'ata, mjumbe ama senator wa kutoka pale Murang'a, alikuwa ameleta ule mswada pale, lakini kwa sababu katika BBI hilo ni jambo ambalo sisi tutaweka mkazo ndio tuweze kupitisha. Lakini ingekuwa vizuri kama hii BBI Bwana Spika, tungekuwa tukiangalia kipengee kwa kipengee. Tunaangalia ni kipi kizuri tunaweka, tuweze kujua sukari ni nini, hiyo tunapitisha. Tukiona chumvi ni nini Bwana Spika, kwa sababu pengine chumvi wewe itakukera kidogo, tunaondoa. Hiyo ndiyo jambo, pengine tungalia kipengee kwa kipengee. Hilo ndiyo jambo ambalo naona ingetufaidi zaidi Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, tumekuwa hapa tukijadili mambo haya.
Samahani Mheshimiwa Seneta Kinyo, unamaanisha kwamba Mheshimiwa Spika hawezi akastahimili uchumvi?
Bwana Spika, pole, sikumaanisha vile nilisema ni ya kwamba pengine tuweze kung'amua Bwana Spika. Nilitaka tu pengine ni kulinganisha. Nilikuwa nikilinganisha, sisemi huwezi ukastahimili, lakini najua unaweza ukastahimili, pengine ni kiwango cha chumvi ambacho kitakachukua tukisema. Bwana Spika, jambo ambalo lingine ningependa kusema ni ya kwamba katiba ambayo tunaijadili siku ya leo, tumesema ya kwamba katika katiba yenyewe ambayo nikiangalia marekebisho yaliyoko, inasemekana ya kwamba ati county ambayo haiwezi ikapata mara 3 ya vile ambavyo pesa zimepana ule ingine Bwana Spika. Hiyo ni vizuri julikane Bwana Spika. Hiyo mimi naunga mkono kwa sababu Bwana Spika, sisi sote tuko sawa katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, na tukiangalia kabisa Bwana Spika, sehemu ambayo mimi nawakilisha Bwana Spika, tumekuwa tumebaki nyuma kwa muda mrefu, na ikiwa wakati umekuja wa sisi kuweza kunufaika, kwa sababu sisi wote ni Wakenya Bwana Spika, na Wakenya wote wana huru, wana haki ya kuamini sisi sote ni Wakenya. Najua kama Kiambu Bwana Spika, nyinyi wenyewe umekuwa na shida nyingi, unapata mtu mmoja anapata elfu kama 5, na ukiangalia sehemu zingine mtu mmoja pesa zikigawa kabisa anapata zaidi ya 17,000. Hiyo sio haki Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri mambo yote yalinganishwe na sisi sote tuseme ya kwamba sisi ni Wakenya, ndio tuweze kutembea pamoja. Bwana Spika, asante.
Asante sana kwa kujieleza vizuri sana, ila ungaliingia kwenye mashaka wakati ulikokuwa unasema kwamba Spika hawezi kustahimili makali ya chumvi, lakini nakubaliana naye kwamba lazima tugawe fedha kulingana na wingi wa watu, kulingana na rasilimali. Sasa hivi nampa nafasi mzee wetu seneta wa Kisii, seneta Profesa Samson Ongeri. Na kabla hujazungumza, nafikiri ni vizuri niseme kwamba idadi ya maseneta imeweza kuongezeka, kwa hiyo hatutaweza kuzidisha muda wa kikao zaidi ya saa 12:30. Nafikiri kutakuwa na kikao maalum kitakachorejelewa Alhamisi, ndiposa maseneta kama Uchilo Wayako na Christine Zawadi Gona waweze kuchangia. Seneta Ongeri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute towards this very important debate. First, let me say this, that in any nation, in any country, the element of cohesion is so important for the survival of its own citizens. And that's why, if you look at the historical perspective of this nation, when in 2000 to 2002, there was this contentious clause of Article 2A of the Constitution. And when we went around, and the chair was Professor George Saitoti, and I was the vice chairman, whether we should amend that clause, everybody was saying, yes, there was no need to be able to have a single party. We need a multi-party democracy. And when was this put? When this decision was put to vote at Kasarani, all of you, those who were there, will remember that a lot of people opposed that proposal. And at the end, the president saw, in his wisdom, late President Moi, that it was prudent for the nation to move together so that we avoid any controversy that may arise, and ask the membership of KANU at that stage to allow Article 2A of the Constitution to be in, and that ushered in the multi-party democracy that we have today. And I remember his vice president then joined the DP and subsequently became the president of this nation. Again, if you remember, run up to 2007, we had what we call skirmishes, tribal clashes, and many other nasty situations. And that elicited Kenyans to look for a way of understanding one another. And we had the Serena event, the Serena negotiation team, headed by the late His Excellency Kofi Annan, and we were able to manage that item extremely well. And I was a member of that committee as well, and quite a number of members of the senators who are here in this house. That brought in a constitutional moment, because the recommendation coming out of that committee then ushered in the 2010 constitutional moment that we agreed upon. And again, in order to put history into perspective, when we promulgated the 2010 constitution, it was agreed that 80% of that constitutional articles were all right, but the 20% of it needed to be corrected. And as you know, our constitution clearly spells out, there shall be a review of constitutional boundaries on every 8 to 10 years. And that constitutional moment is now. It's now more than 10 years since we promulgated that constitutional, and that 20% needed to be looked at. Normally, this initiative would have been carried out by the IBC, but unfortunately, because of the 2017 acrimony in the final results of the presidential vote, this ushered in a controversy that saw the country split in the middle. And let us not cheat ourselves. Let's accept one moment that the handshake did bring about peace in this nation. And peace is a priceless commodity. You cannot argue against it. You cannot be able to say that there was no peace. And therefore, when I see members of this House arguing that this is not an opportune time to amend the Constitution, they seem to be oblivious of the fact that this tranquility that they are enjoying now is as a result of that handshake. And therefore, the handshake at its moments of truth, the handshake at its moments of light in this nation, that it brought the two antagonists together, protagonists and antagonists together, to be able to pull out for purposes of record of this House. If all of you remember, the BBI was launched in Kisii County. And therefore, we were the first county to be able to launch the BBI. And at that time, we did enumerate the items that needed to be covered in the BBI. And finally, when the BBI report was ready, Kisii County was again the one where they launched the final BBI product. What baffles me today, that we took part in the launching of the BBI, we took part in the ushering in of the BBI report, but we end up with zero constituency. That in itself is not fair. And I think it's a matter that needs to be looked at, because when I look at the BBI report, it has very many good points, but what I really needed to bring about is, yes, it was by popular initiative, because it was anchored on the Article 257 of the Constitution. This was not a parliamentary process. And let's not argue whether it's a popular or for two people or not, but the issue is that it was a popular initiative, because a lot of Kenyans bought in, because they bought in the peace dividends that they were enjoying at that time. What we now need to do is look at these articles that have been elaborated in this Constitution, whether they are suitable or they are not suitable. We don't have to fight about it. We need to argue intelligently together. We need to consult each other intelligently together and see what is the best way for the Kenyans to move forward. Now, one of the things that I need to say is Clause 3, as inserted Article 114 on economy and shared prosperity. One of the nagging problems is there are two levels of government, the national government and the county government. But the sharing of those resources hitherto has been confined to about 15%. The Constitution now clearly spells out, this proposal in the BBI clearly spells out that this is no longer going to be day-to-day business. What is going to happen, that every county, when it comes to shareable revenue, they will be able to get 35%, and it's being anchored in the Constitution of Kenya. This is a good thing. We cannot say it's bad, and nobody's going to deny the counties to get the 35% shareable revenue that they have been denied for the last 10 years. And I think when it goes to that level, it will be a good thing. When it comes to the question of devolving the resources to the ward level, again, in this proposal by the BBI, they have quite cleverly argued that we can be able to create what you call a county assembly fund, which will be able to help in the area of devolution, because at the moment, the governors do not give, some of the governors, not all the governors, some of the governors do not give resources to the county assembly to function independently. And I think in this BBI, there's a moment for us to be able to create a fund for the county assembly so that they can be able to share those resources with the county assembly, and the county assembly will be in a position to oversight also the county executive on the funds and the resources that have been appropriated to them through the DORA and CARA process. And that's a good thing. And thirdly, that of the county revenue, both the national shareable revenue and the on-source revenue combined together, they should appropriate 5% as ward development fund. This will bring equity and equality to the ward development fund, because at that level, there is so much that has been left out. Some of the wards have been developed properly, others have not been developed equally, and therefore there will be a sense of equity that we brought in this kind of resource allocation to the ward level, and therefore the development will be even and will be okay and will be proper. So in terms of resource mobilization, resource sharing, there has been enough adequate legal framework which have been put in place that will benefit from this particular item in the BBI proposal. I'm going through, because if I had to go through the text that I had written here, it would take too long. I want to summarize it. So that's the element of it that I'm quite happy with, and I don't think I have any qualms with that kind of proposal, because it improves on the current constitution, which is only 15%. One of the elements that I have seen in this proposal is that hitherto, this shareable revenue that goes to the county governments were unable to access the resources that have been allocated from the national government to the county government, simply because we have either not agreed on the division of revenue allocation, or we have not agreed on the CARA, County Allocation Revenue Bill. And this has caused immense delay and difficulties for county governments to operationalize their activities. And therefore, in this BBI, there is a proposal that the controller budget can approve up to 50% of the shareable revenue, so that the county governments cannot come to a standstill and start borrowing money from the banks to be able to support the activities of the county governments, and therefore make them functional, not dormant. And this is a good arrangement in the BBI report. And I think that's a report that we should take on board, and we should agree that this is correct. There are many other proposals that have been also put in this BBI report. For instance, the appointment of ministers and the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister from the Parliament, from the National Assembly to be specific. For the first time, you know, we have been having problems of accountability and oversight in this place. When we wanted to oversight a ministry, you had to write a letter through the chair of the relevant committee to be able to go and source the information. And one of the things I've seen that the chair of the committees have been very frustrated, because sometimes the ministers are unable to respond to their answers that they need to bring to this house for debate and discussion. This has been amended. Therefore, ministers coming from Parliament is a good thing. I know at my time, when we were ministers, not only were we answerable to the Parliament, as we are answerable to the constituencies, we are also answerable to the cabinet of the matter we bring to the House for debate and deliberations. And therefore, there would have been no excuse for government to say we are not represented in the House of Parliament, and therefore we cannot be able to provide this information. We are not even allowed to step in the precincts of Parliament unless by invitation. Now, this element has been cleared, and I think we are quite happy with that arrangement, because it helps us to be able to do well. So, in as far as that arrangement is concerned, again, one of the contentious issues, every election, there's been contestation, there's been disputes, there have been disputes, there have been problems, there have been fights, loss of life, loss of opportunities for Kenyans to do business. And therefore, this BBI has been able to bring in a structure that will help us to address those issues that are very important and very critical. The only thing now I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is when I look at the constituency sharing, the 70 constituencies that have been alienated by Parliament, by BBI, to go to specific counties, that I'm uncomfortable with. Because, for instance, take Kisii County. Kisii County, we have a very large population in Bobasi constituency. There's no way the people in Bobasi, because in the last constitutional review, they were promised that they will be the next online to be given an additional constituency. Come this time, during the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Bobasi constituency was on the list of one of the constituencies to be split into 2 constituencies. But when it came to the final report of BBI, that constituency is not there. What do I tell the people of Kisii County? That now you don't have a constituency, you were there before. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics says you were entitled to a constituency, you are not there any longer. So how are they going to be convinced? And in the last constituency review, they had been assured that they will be able to be captured in that. That's going to be very difficult, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I appeal whoever is looking at this, that they must know how to factor in Bobasi constituency to be split into 2. Kisii town itself is a growing town. The population is very high. South Mogrango is a growing constituency. The population is very high. In fact, in order of priority, it will be Bobasi, number 1, South Mogrango, number 2, and then Kisii Township, number 3. And we contribute in the economic prosperity of this nation because we have more than 28 banks operating in Kisii town, and we have more than 60% of money circulation originates from the Kisii County. And therefore, it's very important that if that alone can be a factor, then we should be given an opportunity to be able to move on and be able to get an external addition, at least the most minimum, to get Bobasi constituency split into 2 rather than 1. And all those other areas like Homa Bay, they got nothing, and therefore they are entitled. Kitui, they got nothing, they're entitled to it. This is an area I will invite both the proponents of the BBI and the IEBC to be able to look at this and be able to agree on how they can treat this matter, because it's an important matter that needs to be treated well. Now, there are other issues that have been brought up which are unconstitutional that I think I will ask where there are typographical errors. I think we should go ahead and be able to amend those and be done with. But otherwise, on the basis of that and barring of what I've already said, and I've already expressed my opinion, and this is the opinion of the people of Kisii County and in Nyamira as well, I believe that we are entitled to that constituency and we should negotiate and we shall not tire until we are able to get that constituency in place. I support this bill. Thank you.
Asante sana. Nafikiri tunaweza kuamka sasa. Waheshimiwa maseneta, ni wakati wa kuahirisha kikao hiki cha seneti. Kikao hiki cha seneti sasa hivi kimeahirishwa mpaka kesho Jumatano tarehe 5 Mei mwezi wa 2021 saa 2:30 katika ukumbi wa bunge la kitaifa saa 8:30 wakati wa kuwa na kikao cha jumla kwa bunge lote zima.